Gedes lahan hanni kjærer, Shei molene gers nachen åtte tus. Leishonna moache linis beirun, Avragach me shaller one. Marger hertu arum teire, File gragas ni latse morun. Ach ik de farrier geir, Ta ne schleife ti golle dyr mes tu. Ta no gardini shai wasach, File gragal agus michel omhein. Ta na pausi sio egi fosan, Isi vrach tu waka tu riev, Ni chlen ha kjole klarsi, Gwale tracha na kjolpin anen. Ore dela magrawem, Kulinalen go koshlan inein. Isi koshlan inein. Ta na perla wan diamse mora. Adog mei hein is beisto. Kom is chantwa halach I ward shachon yenes cholin smora achawal lina fall achon reldi knowledge etarne maludan ho. Ore danyon mastorin, Sei a galit ich op I blaklie. Ore danyon avistei, Sei a galer maljudir, Kei gerlom se tiron, Nier Tarisk mar spray, Ach bar lamse va poste, Lemastorin e koshlan I neil. Mille Maggie.
Just want to ask you two questions that might seem like they're about sociology, but I think they're about, the other way you could put it is they're about tectonic plates, that the way Ireland changed and you're catching a certain moment of it. The first one is, we're in a building here which was called the vocational school. And I went to the Christian Brothers down there, and near the train would meet. In other words, no one in the Christian Brothers ever did woodwork. The idea that a woodwork teacher would come in down there would be, as you say, considered, who's going to do woodwork? I mean, I want, that it was considered, it was a class question, that somehow people from a certain class did woodwork and people from another class learned Latin. So you're catching a certain moment where a woodwork teacher arrives in what is in some ways a sort of posh school with an ambitious, let's say, principal, with a lot of people who want to become, for example, one kid wants to become a doctor, so the chances of him studying woodwork are slim because he's really all the odds are against him studying woodwork. But this might seem a small issue, but actually a woodwork teacher arriving and a serious person bringing people in together is actually an important moment in Ireland. And you are catching that as a central drama of your novel.
You're the first person that's ever asked me about this, and it's so important, actually. And I'm really conscious that we're also sitting under a beautiful painting of you in this book.
Yeah, if you could just if you could just turn that inwards. I mean, I didn't. Could you just get on with it? Because really now.
So this was the old vocational school, this building. So it was that sort of that amalgamation, wasn't it, of ideas recently, and it is recent in lots of towns actually, and it's fascinating how those old sort of cultural ideas and the cultural legacy of the Latin schools, it's not Latin per se, but it might be applied maths.
The model school.
And then the schools where people learn to do things with their hands, and and you're right about the class issue, because it's a very difficult, it's not a tangible issue in rural Ireland, but that was one way of denoting it, I think, or kind of understanding it maybe in a way.
So you're catching the novel at a moment of disruption.
Yeah, that he arrives, and he comes into this space. And actually, I think also Jamie, so the boy, the main character, is also quite a disruptive force. There are three quite disruptive characters without meaning to be, if that makes sense. They just arrive in this space, but particularly the woodwork teacher, because yes, he comes together, he brings people together, and that's exactly what they don't want to happen in a school like that. People are supposed to be on their own and on their own individual journeys and doing their own thing for the great academic good of the town. And again, it comes down to a hierarchy as well. So they're going to position these people in places of power subtly.
There's a very moving moment towards the end of the book where young O'Toole comes in, and he just says, my father says he doesn't want me to come. I had to go to the palace to see the bishop because they don't want me to come to your woodwork school. Yeah. And the teacher has to say to him, Foley has to say to him, are you ever going to think for yourself? Is your life always going to be where you give in to them each time? And the kid more or less says, yes, it is. He just doesn't know how. But for a moment later, he gingerly appears. But it's a very dramatic moment.
And somebody is nodding here, because a lot of people have an issue with Tadhg in that moment, that he was very uncaring and unkind to the character as well, by putting it up to him, are you going to study woodwork? Are you going to stay with me? Are you going to make this boat? And he opts to stay with these people. And then another boy opts to, they make two different decisions.
I think there are two ways of looking at that. I think that he's actually being slightly offensive in the language he's using himself. He's not being careful with Foley to say, he uses the phrase, it's beneath me. And that's the moment where Foley just says, for Foley seems to think, actually, you've crossed a line, in saying, it's beneath you.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating way of looking at craft, isn't it? And I suppose you've hit on something, maybe not to get personal this early in the conversation, I wasn't to do this at all, but that idea that I think it's similar to how I felt about craft and how I felt about growing up in rural Ireland and how I felt about people who made things with their hands, my grandparents, and that idea that everything good was going to be found in a book, and that every escape I was going to have was going to be through some sort of lofty academic notion. And we learn the lessons too late that these things are very valuable, and actually there's great intelligence and there's great skill in it, and there's great intuition in people who work with their hands, and we've become very much book people. And I think this was a book to get me back to that in some ways. I think you're always retrospectively looking at your work, right? But I think when I look at it, I think this was about me finding genius in the craft, maybe.
When the people came off the Blasket Islands, they walked in single file when they went into Dingle, because they were so used on the paths of the big Blasket Island to walk in single file. So they continued walking in single file, and the people of Dingle thought they could talk to each other, 5 or 6 of them, as they walked in single file, and the people of Dingle thought this was funny, and they laughed at them. And they didn't appreciate this, the people from the island, so they went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and en masse, where people didn't laugh at them. And this idea of the islands as a sort of haunting presence, as somehow that someone from the Aran Islands comes into Galway and someone's watching them and saying, there's a various thing about them. First of all, that they could be laughed at. There's something, their clothes, how they walk. But secondly, they have with them something else, something that's been lost certainly in Galway City. They have. So there's a mixture of magic and a sort of primitive thing that people are not sure they appreciate. And that again is another moment in the novel where Tadhg is arriving in from the island with a sort of magic, a mixture of magic, independence of mind, which thrives in a certain way, but in another way, of course, he's being watched carefully by the school and by the parents.
for being the disruptive force.
For being
as well.
from the island, almost.
Yeah, and he's quite a singular individual, and he'll do what he feels he needs to do. And again, it's a lot of intuition with him, and he's quite a silent sort of He was difficult. Like, I mean, I wanted to shake him and say, you have to do something here, regular times, you really could really make a major change. But like when I started to write this book, I had big ideas. I don't know if it's similar with you. Oh, I mean, we were
like
going from dystopia to why do they need to build a boat to escape? And it was just crazy. And
hold on, did you write that, or did you just plan it?
Yeah, I wrote loads of, I went down loads of different
Could you
roads.
just go into detail over how the book then began? I mean, the first draft.
Yeah, so the book was very much began with Jamie's voice. He was knocking on my door for such a long time, and this is what it is like for me with characters. So they really start to speak to me, and they come alive, and they irritate me. And he kept saying, he was this child voice of about 11 or 12 at the time. He was 13 by the time I got to write him, but he was saying, "Did you know that, Elaine? You do know that. Did you know that?" And I knew he needed a boat, but I didn't know why he needed a boat. And because I'm absolutely useless at plot, I was like, he'll need a boat for a big, mad reason. And actually, the more I went down that road, it didn't change hugely, but he needed the boat to escape Ireland. He needed the boat to escape. What did he need the boat to escape from? And actually, he needed the boat to come back to himself. And it was a novel that I had to slow down with. And I wrote it a lot during lockdown, actually. So it's very different to As You Were, which I suppose is very cacophonous, and it's a lot of auditory noise. It's a very noisy novel. This is just a very simple, piece by piece. And that's really, I had to pare it back and pare it back and pare it back. It was running away on me a little bit. But the boy was always there. Tess was always there. The teacher meeting the boy at the same moment. So she takes off from her house, Emery Woods, and he takes off from his on the same day, at the same time, in the same moment. Both of them are filled with anxiety, and they meet at a spot. And that was always going to happen.
Did you steal that from Ulysses? No, because I mean that's the opening of James Joyce's novel, where Stephen Dedalus for 3 episodes is moving in a certain direction, and he sees certain clouds. There's a particular cloud he sees, and then on the 4th episode, Leopold Bloom wakes up, and they're going to meet eventually. But the same cloud, you realize, the parallax moment that the same cloud is over, that has been over Dorky or over Sandy Cove, is now over Leopold Bloom's house. And I did think for a moment, the same 2 people are moving in the same direction. They're going to meet one another, and here they are in the same landscape.
Can I rewind and say I did? Of course, that's what it's totally influenced. It was absolutely Martell of the Tower.
Just to go back to this is the 3rd moment where you're getting a certain moment in sociology and what's changing in Ireland and applying it to the novel, which is the allowing of him into the school. That he would be seen as, I suppose, special needs. There'd be a moment where he wouldn't be allowed into a proper class, and now here he is arriving. And what you've done is amazing, because you haven't just brought us into his mind in that he is at certain moments sort of crazy, but what he is at certain moments also is he's very logical. His mind is brilliant. You can see the way he's working out the logic, not only of things in mathematics, but actually everything everyone says he examines to see if it could possibly be true. So he has a sort of a mind you can really watch, and it's consistent. It's brilliantly done, and so that you begin by imagining him.
Yeah, he was very much talking to me, and I was very interested in the school as an oppressive legacy of a town with a hierarchy and regional towns in Ireland, and that idea of who's who and what's what and who puts who in whose place. I'm always fascinated by power and who has power and who gives it to somebody else and how we give away our power so easily. And I am very interested in that whole school dynamic with respect to students who would come in. I was a teacher for years, and students that would come into a school, and they go from, like at 13, they're going from religion into science, from creationism into evolution, into me for English, teaching Plath or whatever. And they move along through their day, and we're not the focus of their day. They want to get out in the yard, they want to meet girls and other boys. But I'm really fascinated by those students who come in and listen to every single thing that every teacher says, and they take it absolutely as gospel, and they don't filter it. So you're given a message, somebody else is given a contradictory message, And I thought about what that does to a mind that's so open like Jamie's, but Colm said, you know, in Nora Webster. And then, you know what I mean? And then I went into maths, and that was very logical. And then we went in and we prayed to souls. And most students at that stage can manage all of that information because most of them aren't listening to you anyway. And that's great. But for somebody like Jamie, with a mind like Jamie, I was interested in how disruptive that must be. So disruption is very much a theme of the conversation, but how disruptive that has to be. He wants to figure stuff out. His mom died when he was born, so he doesn't know her. He wants to figure out energy around dead people. He has a lot that he needs to figure out. And the school just isn't equipped to manage a boy like him, I think. Not fully.
But it lets him in.
It lets him in, yeah.
And there's one teacher and then two that actually take him on big time and come to appreciate him. And then there's boy 1, boy 2, and then later boy 9, as well as boy 3. Boy 3 seems, boy 2 disappears. Boy 1, boy 3, who sort of bully him. But it doesn't become a novel about bullying him. They're just there in the background as sort of unruly and noisy and nasty. But that's not the story. So it's not to be the story of a boy with special needs arriving in a nasty Irish school with a nasty principal, some nasty boys, and they sort of crush him. That you're determined not to do that. Is that right?
So, yeah, and going back to the sociological aspect of it, I suppose Ireland changed dramatically in 2000 and 2004 with the EPSN Act, the Education for Persons with Special Education Needs, which allowed admissions. Everybody could apply to any school and then be admitted unless your admissions were full. I was fascinated by this legislation as a teacher at the time, and I thought it was groundbreaking. But the issue also is the resourcing of the schools, and how do you train teachers fast enough when they have 30 other students and you're trying to differentiate for everybody's needs. But it was groundbreaking with regards to inclusion, and it was probably the first step. So absolutely, different students turned up in different spaces where they ordinarily wouldn't have been perhaps enrolled. And so when you have somebody like Jamie, who is he's going to speak his mind clearly and articulately and with articulation. And what you say to him isn't going to maybe hurt him in the way it might hurt another boy. So actually they tire with him very quickly because, and it just, he isn't the piece for them, which I love about him, because he's big, he hurts them accidentally by just banging into them. And I wanted him not to have to stand up for himself, not to just be himself, and that was enough to kind of scare them. Yeah. You know those people who are not afraid to say what they what they think. They can be really powerful.
I thought your picture of his father, Owen, and of his grandmother was just superb in that you didn't bring them into the centre of the book, but they're there all the time watching. They're not over-worried. Owen and Jamie are sometimes in competition sometimes almost, but Owen, you realise Owen has been through a lot with him. And it's brilliantly done because there are not too many scenes between him and Owen, and yet you're aware he's being really watched, loved and cared for, including by his grandmother.
Yeah, and for me, Owen is a real tragic character in the novel. Actually, he, had this boy young and raised him with the help of his mother next door. And yeah, he is really the tragic character in the novel for me, actually, because but he's full of anxiety around his son. I feel I can sense it, but he doesn't deal with it head on. Yeah,
I didn't find him tragic as much as absolutely fascinating in that you didn't overdo the sort of drama of watching and anxiety. You just imply it, and the reader is aware of it all the time. But Owen seems immensely kind.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
As opposed to the prince. I'm coming to this, the kindness bit, because the principal of the school is irredeemable. And he's one of those people that I think a lot of people might recognise. A lot of us have worked for people like that. But the lectures on masculinity, the fact that he's bringing this into the open, and he's talking to this boys' school about, don't be sissies, don't be with girls, you realise this is actually what we're, he really is one of the nastiest characters in Irish fiction. And fiction, isn't he? This priest.
He's such a watered-down version of the original Fox.
I thought you were going to say of someone I know well.
Oh, no.
No. Oh, sorry. Let's go back. He's one of the most... I interrupted you?
No. He's a real watered-down version of Fox. Like, in the end, it's all with him, when you're writing and you rewrite them and you look at them and you have to, be three-dimensional about it, and sometimes there's a kind of an inclination with the character like Fox to be two-dimensional, and maybe I was a little bit at times. But his threat, his bark is worse than his bite in a way. So what is his power? Who gave him his power? If we challenge him, what will become of him? And actually, there's not a whole lot of substance to him at the end. He gives his big speech from his pulpit, and he has the power to do that because he has the microphone at that time. But lots of them aren't really listening to him. And you just think, I think you're just not going to actually be very effective.
I love that we don't see him alone. And I love that we really don't see him functioning in any way generally in the book. That the power of that is given back to Tig.
Yeah.
The boat builder. In other words, the novel takes the power away from this very nasty priest and gives this visionary figure. Now, I'm interested in the idea of visionary because I was talking earlier about sociology and you're getting Ireland at a certain moment. But it seems to me you're also, by building a boat in the west of Ireland, the idea that boat is going to sail, that you're following a very old business of, let's say, storytelling or myth-making, that there will be a boat and the boat will be mythical, magical, powerful, and also will have a quality of redemption about it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what happens to it because it's built in the space of the school. It's built within the school. So it's that idea of building something very beautiful and transportive in this space of oppression. And in that whole idea, I suppose maybe I wasn't really thinking this when I wrote it, but, like I said, retrospectively, maybe I am trying to do something, turn the thing back inside out or outside in again, with all the what has happened with the church in the last, 50, 60, 70 years with respect to within the school to build something beautiful and see, can we move it somewhere? I don't know. Maybe that's putting too much on the book, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think the book has more. I think you put more on the book than that. Because not just about, in the woodwork room, they built a boat. It is that this boat takes on these qualities which seem it's going to redeem everything. It's going to actually... I want to go back to this thing. The boat is a boat. Before it's symbolic, before it's a piece of gold. It's I noticed words that you must have really thole-pin. I mean, give us thole-pin. I don't know. And then it's going to we don't have currachs. So maybe we need explanations of how to build. How do you build a boat? I mean, how did you find out how to build a currach?
Oh, stop. The sweat, it was so stressful because I was so conscious of the weight of centuries with this. So it's just a fascinating machine, a currach, because it's so vulnerable. You can put your foot through it if you don't sit in it properly, and yet it could have transported animals upside down or pulled them after it. And it was absolutely a vessel for survival, and when I went to research it, and I asked, and I went and I met with boat builders. They were coy, and it's difficult, to say, just show me how to build a boat. And there are so many different variants of the currach. And there's even one, a Boyne curricle that looks like a soup bowl. And they're from the whole...
I didn't know.
Yeah, and from the whole West Coast, from Donegal right down, there are different types and different styles. So I decided the safest thing I could do is build a hybrid. So there's a little bit of lots of both.
Yeah, I can see what you were doing there. But I mean, getting words. The thole-pin, I suppose, is where you put the oars. The thing that holds the oars. I would call it the thing that holds the oars. But it's there a few times. This word thole, thole.
Nice
pin.
word though, isn't it?
Thole.
Yeah, I like it. Very masculine.
Yeah, it's Seamus Heaney has a big essay on it in the introduction to Beowulf.
Yeah.
That it's in Anglo-Saxon. I'm interested in it because Seamus Heaney has this essay. It's in Anglo-Saxon, and it came into the North. It's still used as a verb, to thole, meaning to put up with something or to suffer. And then you have it in your. I loved it being. It's in Sing, the Aran Islands, but it's the only place I've seen it. But is it in common use?
No.
Right.
No, yeah, only in literature, I think, for me. And also just research. So there was there's some stuff in the National Archives. But of course, there's currachs all over the west of Ireland. There's half and bits of them in grass, and you can touch them. And I'm obsessed now with going along and looking at them and seeing, was it rods, or did they steam the lats, or did they use the rods?
But
And
hold on,
I
how
went
do you know any of this?
overboard from just research.
But did you go out to the islands and hang out?
Yeah, well, we would have grown up going out to the islands on holidays and stuff like that. I don't know boat builders. My grandfather used to thatch roofs of houses and was a farmer.
Oh, tag thatches.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And I have thatch in the next novel. I'm obsessed.
Good.
Well, again, it goes back to that idea that I never asked my grandfather, how do you thatch a roof? How do you milk a cow properly? I tried, did it badly, because I didn't want to know. And then suddenly they're gone and now I want to know everything. And so I'm trying to figure everything out. But with the book, it was important for me to put an actual manual as to how to build a currach into a novel. So really what I did was write a manual on how to build a boat, and I just kind of bloated a novel around it, and I just snuck it out into the world.
Yeah, I thought your boat in the book had sort of two other, working in two other ways. The first one was that a novel itself is a sort of boat you've built, because there's no science. I mean, it's not as though this boat is being built by any system that we could call scientific. It's almost instinct. And of course, Jamie's worried about this because it doesn't work theoretically. It will leak. So that the first thing it is like a novel itself. It's sort of handmade, man-made, homemade, woman-made. And but the second thing, of course, is it breaks down all of Jamie's problems about reality. In other words, that door is only a door if it's fully tested and measured as a door. Right. It doesn't matter if it works or not. It's the theory of it that, and suddenly over months in this school, it's not as though he's been taught to build a boat. Mm-hmm. He's been taught to watch how contingent, how it could go wrong. It's not exact, but it might work, and it's all the better maybe for being, that the hide is stitched, or that nothing is fully, I suppose,
perfect.
Scientifically, nothing's fully perfect. Mm-hmm. And that has enormous implications for him, but also for the reader.
Yeah, I feel that, like, between my generation and my parents or grandparents, we became very book obsessed, and that we had to know exactly the right way to do things or to research things correctly. And, there'd be a lot of showing you how to do things rather than any actual vocalization of it, if that makes sense. And the idea that we would learn off someone that used their hands without them having to even verbalize that they can show you, tactile. And that tactile ability to learn is as intellectual and as intelligent as, someone who can learn auditory by an auditory way of learning. Yeah. And that's not always respected in the same way, I feel. So Jamie had to learn to trust. Now, he was not happy.
No.
He was not happy, and he's still not happy. I mean,
no, he's still after the
happy.
book. I can see that he's still, yeah. He'll be worried
like,
about
it didn't fix him in any way, shape, or form, but he had to.
I know, it's brilliant the way it isn't. It isn't as though it fully makes him into, It was one of the most chaotic times of his life, I'd say. Yeah.
I'd say he never wants to see another boat being built, but
I think that's probably true. Yeah, you're writing a sequel. So I was going to ask you about at what point in the writing of the book did you make those sentences that don't begin with a capital letter? You have a sentence, and then for about 4 lines, it could be like something in a poem. Was that there always as a method?
Yeah, I write like that a lot, and I think for me, I'm constantly trying to, play with form, play with phrasing, play with pace. And utterances, and the way that people are frenetic and frantic, and to try and capture that in writing, if that makes sense. Yeah. And not in. I'm very suspicious of narratives that begin and go through nicely and end. I'm suspicious of who gave me that style and that form, and who says to me that that's a novel. It's not the way my people speak, or I have ever spoken.
But it's not the way the poet. It's not the way the poet also writes a novel either, is it?
No, but I think that can be very unfair on the reader as a poet to give a book with broken up, fragmented.
Yeah, but it really works. Yeah. I mean, it's not just a poet coming and saying, "Here's me." It is actually it is integrated. I think very beautifully in the text.
Well, thank you, because I know it can be difficult.
But I think that's I would imagine. But there are a whole lot of things I want to ask you. Now, talk to me about grief. Because the book I was going to say it's laden, but it isn't, of course, because just each one has their own sorrow, their own loss. They carry it in very different ways, but there are moments where, I mean, with the drunken father on the street on Christmas Eve, but also just that everyone has their own version of who was lost in the earlier generation and how, and what it meant. All these palpable absences in the book. It makes it could load it with sorrow, but oddly enough, everyone just carries it as though it's something that belongs to them. It's sort of natural. Natural, is that possible?
Yeah, well, I think it is. I think death is natural and it feels very unnatural, but I think, we're all terminal cases, was Bukowski that said that.
Oh dear.
But we are, I suppose, and loneliness is something that I consider a lot. I just feel that it's not given space often for people to be in a state of loneliness or in a state of grief. And I think for anyone who works in a community situation, whether it's a school or a hospital or, in those kind of community jobs, I think grief is all around us. In a classroom situation, I had the most extraordinary students that had the most extraordinary loss as young people, and they carried it lightly in that situation because that's their public situation. And I just thought it was extraordinary. And I did want to explore it, how people have to come into a space where they meet each other. So it's not a real novel about the Irish family that a lot of Irish novels are. It's about strangers actually meeting.
Yeah.
Because there isn't the weight of that when you meet a stranger. You can have it, but you can find other things to talk about.
Oh,
or
right,
when you're
that's
with
fascinating.
family.
So that the way of holding it lightly is that people don't have to live with it because they have to go out with it and they can't constantly project it.
Correct. Yeah. And well, they could, I suppose, and it'd be very human to do so.
But they could do it once,
Yeah. But I think that's it. And I think, I've heard you talk about loss and loneliness, and how you've dealt with it also in your work. I mean, it's just there. If you're writing humans and human interaction, it's there in everybody's story. But it's so profoundly heavy and tragic. But also people then just get on with their day-to-day thing and the functioning of the day-to-day. So I am really inspired by people who have, bore their grief lightly in situations, especially young people.
Tess. I mean, it's just great to have a teacher. Like, if only I'd known when I was in school, there were teachers like that out there who had lives, who had, problems, who had, she's just excellent, isn't she? I mean, I just find, that's why I think you can get away with having a principal who's just so deeply unpleasant, because Tess is such a mess. She's so kind, she's so bad, her drinking, the whole business of her. And poor old Paul.
Oh, stop.
Poor Paul. How could you treat Paul? Go on. No. Question.
So
ask a question. How did that idea that she is in some way in control, for example, we presume she's in control in the classroom, that she's some way managing to teach these poems almost perfectly. But then once she's out the door of the classroom, another world begins for her.
There's so much to unpack on what you said. Firstly, how could you treat... This is fiction. We just met up.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the various ways in which, Owen comes to me as such a powerful force because he's anxious without showing it all the time. Paul is just a poor... Anyway... I don't know. What?
Interject.
I know, help me. Get me out of this, would you?
Well, actually, Paul is a product of the school. He is an exact product of the school, of the success of the school, of the student that you mentioned at the beginning, of exactly the road he's going to go down. Walk into a marriage, everything's fine, I'm good, I'm providing, I'm fine. This town has taught me who I am, and that's who I am, and I don't see my wife with all her loss. I see her. And he's not a bad guy. He's not. He's just disconnected from her pain completely. And she's in a state of, I think she's frozen completely. I think she's just in a state of, and she can function fascinatingly in her professional life.
Yeah.
Now, to go back to what you said about you wish you knew that teachers, the amount of students who don't realise they see teachers out in super value, and they're absolutely shocked that you might have to buy bread or wine. I could never do my Christmas shopping local. No way. Really. But it is fascinating. They get really, really shocked. My sister's a teacher and she teaches smallies, and when they see her, they're like, oh, it's like they've seen Kim Kardashian or something, you know. And she's that level in their head. She is everything. So you're absolutely right. But they are just human beings, and they function with the frailty that everybody else functions with also. And they bring, and actually, again, to go back to the front-facing thing, they bring all this pain often because they have lives and they've had loss and they have sick children at home, or, you know, they're going through difficult marriages, whatever, you know, is going on. And it's all concealed, and they have to face 30 teenagers and keep it together. Nowadays, you know, I know it was different.
So I mean, it's vitally important for the novel, isn't it, that she is in a really ambiguous situation, that it's not as though she's all mess or she's all that, you know, that there are times in the day when she functions perfectly. And I think that gives you a sort of energy in the novel, where it isn't merely that, you know, she's a teacher, you give her a job, but that energy there, that was somehow, even her fringe, the way she's described physically, that all of that is somebody managing and not managing at the same time. And the marriage is almost good sometimes. To,
well, it could almost function. And you could almost allow it. And you could continue that way. And you could just have the functionality of it. He cooks, you know. I mean, you could go home to the lasagna in the evening or whatever he's at. But, you know, she could do that. And actually, she makes a really rash decision early on in the novel, and goes and has an ice cream. And it's just bizarre. And I'm like, oh my God, Tess, what are you doing? But she was doing it. And that's how I feel. And I know some writers will say that's ridiculous. She's your character, make her, you know, whatever. And to me, she really was, no, I'm off, Elaine. And that took me a little bit of time to figure her out.
But surely she was never going to have a pregnancy and have a baby in the book.
No, that was never going to happen. How she even got on the cycle of the IVF with him was just, again, she was bringing everything in her life to a moment. And I'd like to think everything I do is quite open-ended in books anyway, and there's a lot of, you know, you can project yourself onto any of the characters in ways that none of them will ever do what you want them to do. But sorry. But with her, I wanted it to be about her making her own decision in the novel in the end. And I think she does, actually.
There's a lovely
tiny decision, but it's a big one in a way.
There's a lovely sentence towards the end of the book where you use a cliche. I can't remember. I wish I had. And you say, for once, a cliche could be accurate.
Oh, I don't.
No, but you actually say that. I mean, you actually write that. And
I'm trying to think of what the cliche was.
Oh, I'll find it in a second. I'll find it in a second. But the lack of cliche in the book, I mean, the fact that you know, I suppose what governs the book is your subtlety. In other words, that you're not going to solve the problem. You're not going to say, here is each person, and we're going to watch them doing their best or their worst, and we're going to then see how... You don't think like that.
No.
You think in a much more subtle way, where I need to show her, you know, suffering. I need to show her teaching, but I'm not going to solve anything. I'm not going to give you how she comes out right or worse in the end. And the same with the boat. The boat is not going to solve Jamie's problems. It's going to give him something that might be memorable for him and thus for the reader.
Yeah. My maths teacher in school, so obviously the maths of Marianne Mirzakhani were very important to the structure of this book, but if I had to explain them now, I don't know, because it was so long ago, but it was. And actually, you at the beginning of the conversation, you said about Ulysses and Stephen and Leopold. Mine was a billiards table, which was how Mirzakhani actually proved some theory. Anyway, that's it.
You mean the theory of chance and theory of possibility?
It was geodesics on hyperbolic surfaces or something, I think.
No,
I don't know.
This
is probably totally
much studied subject in Enniscorthy. So you know you're fine. You're in the right place here.
Well, she won the Fields Medal, and I was just obsessed with her and trying to figure out what she had done to win the Fields Medal, because she was the first woman Fields medalist, and I studied her, and I'm still at a loss. But it looked beautiful anyway when she used to stuff the corners of the billiards table and set balls off in motion. So I thought, you said Jamie, you said Tess, they hit each other, they and the strictures of the town is the billiards table. And Emery is this table, so everyone keeps clashing against each other, but they're all stuck in this space because the holes are, and it could go on for eternity like he's perpetual motion machine. I've totally gone off the point now, sorry, but there was a point.
No, keep going. I mean, this is...
But you know the way people hit off each other on a day-to-day basis and all that, and I thought to myself, what if someone just jumped off the table? What if the ball just went off the table? Where would it go? Plato's cave thing, get out and see. But they didn't actually, so you're absolutely right. There is no resolve to that situation. You just keep going with life. And, you know, sometimes novels can cheat us with that, can't they? With the idea that there is resolve and that it ends in some sort of big climactic way.
Yeah.
Life doesn't end like that. People have regrets. People die lonely. So this is very bleak. People can be very happy. Life can be great. You can go dancing. But, you know, that idea of nothing is ever fully resolved and it's okay.
But you are working with folktale and with myth, not only about the boat that will sort of go out, that is handmade, that is made with a sort of skill and a sort of magic, but there also is the idea of the roving gypsy that the fellow comes in from the island. He's mysterious. He thatches a building. He knows how to build a shower as well as a boat, and he doesn't seem needy.
No.
And yet, Tess, you see that he's almost a dark figure. He's a Heathcliff figure almost.
He is.
And without trying to be. And he's very practical, and you can just see that Paul hasn't a chance beside him as regards winning Tessa's heart. So, it's out of that triangle, there was a dark figure came into the town, and the woman and her husband were walking, and for one moment she caught his eye. That's it. That you are actually using, I suppose, archetypal ideas as well.
Yeah, and it is that idea, and Heathcliff is probably quite accurate, because, I did crush hard on Heathcliff for a long time in my younger life.
I did think that about you.
I wouldn't be stupid enough to marry a Heathcliff, but I could look at them. But it is that guy that can turn up and just do things silently and make stuff and fix things. I think every woman needs someone who can fix everything. No, scratch that, I'm joking. I can fix things for myself quite well. But he just is, he's very handy. And again, I gave it to the guy that could make the thing, the tactile learner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't give it to Paul, who was probably prefect, head boy. I didn't give him the success. No one has great success, but there's a subtle beauty in the way that Tig lives his life, simply.
Yeah.
You have enough already. Yeah. Everything you need is here. You can find space, make with what you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do you know Skerritt, Liam Flaherty's novel, which is, about elemental clash on an island between the forces of the church and the teacher?
Yeah.
You're very careful not to make it into, the man comes from the island, he knows how to build a boat, but the principal of the school knows how to stop him. And that becomes the drama. I just love the way you keep avoiding those dramas that would be so easy to do.
Yeah, because that's the other fascinating thing about people that I've learned, is they actually will avoid the public conflict. And it will be quite a private, subtle sort of taking down of people, which is the scene where she, on Christmas Eve, when her father is there and she meets the father, and then the crowd are watching the play of this. And it's just that moment of subtlety where she decides, these are not my people. And I don't have to sing for my supper with this group of people. So she makes actually a very courageous decision in that moment.
Very big night.
Fight or flight moment, that one. Even though I really try to avoid them, because I hate fighting.
With that scene, it's so well done. Who's drunk, who's sober, who's posh, who's not. And she's in the middle, in between them. Caught absolutely between these two forces. Was there a lot of rewriting in that? Or was that, because it just seemed so beautifully made.
No, that one sort of came to me, that sang to me, that scene. That was very kind of Balya Gungaira, Murphy-esque kind of moment for me, and I kind of felt it was very much in his place when I wrote that. So that was one of the scenes that just kind of came very quickly.
We haven't mentioned Tuam. We haven't mentioned Tuam because you don't mention it.
I don't.
You mentioned Galway. You mentioned Galway. And I'm trying to work out where the river is, and then I know you're from Tuam. You just mentioned Tom Murphy, so it was obviously important. Because in Enniscorthy, Peter Murphy writes novels, and I write novels, and I call it Enniscorthy, and Peter doesn't. And so it's just a different way of thinking about an actual topography.
So I'm from Athenry, but I taught in Tuam for years. So I needed a town that was industrial, but with a beautiful river that was close to the sea. So anyone that's familiar with Galway knows that West Galway is a very different space to East Galway. So I wanted the kind of the grit of the agricultural, that town that was hard done by during the kind of the bust after the Celtic Tiger and so on. So like I couldn't put it in Barna. I mean, that wouldn't work. There'd be too many. Well, I better not say that.
No,
so
Barna's I think Barna's too small anyway, isn't it?
No, exactly. So I really just they needed to launch a boat, so it was kind of difficult. So I just had to actually make a town, which was a lot of fun actually.
And making the corrup and making your own personal corrup.
I
calling
know.
it the brew was just great. Yeah.
Do you think I
do think.
Yeah, because it's not entirely. It really is a mashup of different spaces.
It's also a mythical landscape.
It really is a mythical landscape, exactly.
So if you call it Tuam, you just get, where's the sugar factory? You know, you get into all those businesses of where's the dance hall that Tom Murphy writes about.
I didn't want it to be.
I can see that,
I wanted it to be a mythical place.
Yeah.
And actually, my husband is from Wexford, and I said Wexford would have been a much easier sort of place to write this kind of, I could have actually set it somewhere if I wanted to.
We have the salty islands. And
exactly. But no, it just became, and also I never named the island either. There's a lot of islands off Galway, so that I didn't, maybe I was protecting possibly myself.
I understand that.
Maybe.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Gurmí mag of Rish. All right. Majin mocht och aus mach ruch Elaine. Oma saura chach son crivlen ash is a bonte minere. Hashtol tree while chipot is her bonte minere. Kay often a mash achn cool and jazz left on ye gallon the lay. Near a prognostoca cap na clock my story no gone spare. Ach, a falt fan arg she's go try eg fast go bar on air. Vi kalan krute eken lik Sarah rucht bo jas skeif do rog bar ganer venje se jas le fanje galon lei da hi on rido ki slamash vinche lasten nor Magale vistam we have got pras Maravli nach escarne Shay dorchilum sa emi wem Serhul me reik Ninni the chacht na sal chacht Le fanje galon lei Majin mocht och aus mach ruch Elaine. Anna saura chach son crivlen ash rucht bo jas skeif hashtol tree while tiport rucht bo jas skeif Do rog bar gan vinje sitas le fanje galon lei. Bring Maggie. Thank you.